Welcome, everybody. I am Renny Fulco, and I direct the Public Policy and Law program at Trinity. And I am delighted to be part of this reunion panel this afternoon. I would like to introduce my fellow panelists. And each panelist, I will say their names, and then once everybody is identified, each panelist will say something about themselves for a couple minutes, and then we have some prepared questions, and then we'll be taking Q&A from the audience. And as I say, just welcome. This is such a wonderful occasion, and we are all very pleased to be here. Claudia Baio, Lisa Banks, and LaTanya Langley are my three fellow panelists, and they're going to say a little something about what they do. Claudia.
All right. Thank you.
Go Bantams.
All right. So I'm Claudia Baio, and our 1 to 2 minutes is what we're giving you, and we'll fill in the blanks later, hopefully, when we talk to you as the panel goes on. But I'm class of '86. I majored in English and Educational Studies, and then went on to UConn Law School. Clerked at the Connecticut Appellate Court. I was a civil litigator for almost 30 years, and then was appointed in 2018 to the Connecticut Superior Court bench, where I currently serve, and I'm a judge. So.
I'm Lisa Banks. I am a 1990 grad, a political science major. I had many classes with Renny Fulco, which was terrific, and I am currently a lawyer living just outside of Washington, D.C. I have a plaintiff's side civil rights firm in Washington, do a lot of harassment and whistleblower cases, and happy to be here today.
And hi, everybody. My name is LaTanya Langley, class of '97. I'm the chief legal officer for a publicly traded company. It's called Edgewell. They make pure play products such as Schick. You all may know Schick and Banana Boat, Hawaiian Tropic, very fun consumer good products. I was a political science major and the first minor in law and society, which Professor Fulco helped me make the case for. And I went to UConn Law School, class of 2000. And what else did you say about yourself?
That's it.
That's it. That's it.
Great, thank you for those great introductions. And we, just so you know, we actually had the opportunity to do a Zoom meeting where we got to talk about what we'd like to talk about today. And so these are the questions. I'm not going to take credit for this. We all came up with these questions, and I think they're terrific. And so I'm going to begin, and I think maybe we'll just go in order, but LaTanya, let's start with you this time.
Oh, sure.
Okay? And our first question on this Women and the Law panel is that I'm going to ask our participants, our panelists, to talk a little bit about their own path to a career in law, and perhaps say something about the role a liberal arts education played, what might be unexpected in terms of their careers, and what obstacles or challenges they have really learned from. And so I can repeat that as we go, but basically, a little something about liberal arts, a little something about the unexpected, which is always interesting to hear about, and then finally talking about obstacles and challenges. So again, if you need a reminder, I will certainly do that.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So I was the kid that knew from the day I was born that I was going to be a lawyer. I used to play court with my Cabbage Patch Kids. Barbie and Ken would always have a fight, and Ken would go to jail. And I would defend him. So I was always the judge and the jury and the lawyer. I watched court shows, so I knew. My grandmother actually told me that she dreamed that I would be a lawyer as well, so she kind of confirmed it. And so when I came to Trinity, I knew that I needed to find professors like Professor Fulco. My first course, I had a judge who was teaching. I forgot the name of the course. Damien and I took that course together. And I just made sure I was involved in the political science, legal, anything that had law involved. And so I knew that was my passion. And, you know, the beauty of being at the liberal arts school and having this desire to be a lawyer was that I was exposed to areas outside of the law that helped shape my career. So for example, I had one of my professors, Professor Woldu, encouraged me to study abroad. And so again, Professor Fulco, and there was another professor in the political science department helped me, you know, apply to this program at the London School of Economics. And I studied abroad in London, and I worked with a female barrister. And her name was Dora Belford, and she had blue nail polish. And she was just a badass. And I would go to court with her. She represented, you know, criminals, and, you know, she was the first woman barrister in the Inns of Court. And so I just had the amazing benefit of watching a woman leader just go in and be brave and be bold and take on really difficult cases. And it literally just continued to drive my passion to basically break barriers as a woman in the law. And so when I came back from London, I went straight to law school. From law school, I worked in big law in New York, big law firms. From the big law firms, I then came back to Connecticut and worked in a large Connecticut law firm until I found my way in-house. And so my first in-house opportunity was at Diageo, which is the world's largest alcohol beverage company. They make Johnny Walker, and most of you are Trinity people, so Guinness.
You really focus on the fun products, don't you?
Yes, alcohol products. And when I worked there, I just had this drive and this passion to go abroad again. And so I went to my CEO and just said, can I please have an experience working in emerging markets? And he kind of laughed. He said, you know, that's cute. You know, you're a cute kid, you know, went to school in New Canaan, you live in Norwalk. We don't know if you have the appetite to work in an emerging market. And so about 3 weeks later, he comes back to me and he says, you know what? We're going to send you to an emerging market and see how you do. And so I'm waiting to find out, where am I going? China, you know, maybe Japan. And he's like, you're going to Ghana. And I said, okay, I don't know where it is, but let's go. And so for the next 2 years, I lived and worked as the head of legal for Guinness in Ghana, for Guinness Africa. But they put me in Ghana because that was the safest country in Africa. And again, learning how to work in an emerging market, in a challenging environment where the rules are not so clear as it is in the U.S. Was an amazing experience. And then when I came back to the States from that role, I was hired to be the head of legal at BIC, so the pin company, razors, and I was the head of legal for emerging markets, and basically spent the next 7 years traveling 98% of the time to, you know, countries in Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, India, Asia, and I spent 7 years being fully immersed as a lawyer in these challenging markets. And that basically shaped my career to be first an international lawyer and an emerging markets lawyer, and now chief legal officer for a global publicly traded company. And it all started with the one conversation with Professor Fulco, Professor Woldu, encouraging me to take on an opportunity outside of my comfort zone in another country. Yeah.
Great story.
So I think the question was about the education, liberal arts education. And so I'd start there and talk about why I think that's really important when you're considering a career in the law. And I think it's because, like you mentioned, you get a broad-based education. You learn about a lot of different things. But you're also focused a lot on writing and communicating, both orally and in writing. And one of the most important things that I think I got at Trinity, particularly working with you, was writing. And whether you're in law or you're in business, it's really one of the most critical skills to be able to communicate well in writing. And it can translate almost directly into success. And so I think it's incredibly important when you're at a liberal arts school like this to take advantage of the opportunity to learn how to communicate in writing and verbally. And I think that was incredibly helpful in sort of my career in the law, both in law school and in my early career. So that's what I would say about liberal arts. I think that was incredibly important. I don't know if we should talk about the rest of our careers at this point, or how you want to
Well,
pivot.
just,
Skip the unexpected part, 'cause I wanted to let
yeah,
her
the
finish.
kind of
Yeah.
unexpected
Yeah.
and,
save that one so we can all
challenges.
do it.
But you can talk about it in any order, I mean, but maybe just say a word about, challenges.
So I think, some of the challenges that I faced was, well, first of all, I didn't know I wanted to be a lawyer from, day one. I wasn't playing it with my Barbie dolls. But what I did want to do is I wanted to play baseball for the Boston Red Sox. So I don't know if Sam Kennedy's still around, but maybe I could talk to him about that. And at some point along the way, my father said to me, there aren't any girls who play for the Red Sox or play baseball. You're not going to be able to do that. And I was just so upset by this. And I thought this was so unfair. And I really feel like at that moment I became a civil rights advocate. And I was going to fight against injustice, and I was going to fight for the underdog. And I never did get to play professional baseball, but what I am doing now is going after Major League Baseball and the NFL and other entities for wrongdoing. So I was able to follow that path to work for the underdog. So, I currently represent 40-something women in their fight against the NFL and the Washington football team for harassment and assault that occurred over 20 years. I have wrangled with the MLB over issues related to a couple of their players. I represented Christine Blasey Ford in the Kavanaugh hearings back in 2018. So I've been able to do a lot of those things that I think sort of came from that moment way back when I realized, this is unfair and we should fight back against it. So there have been challenges, of course, along the way. What I do can be extremely unpopular with certain people. And so I've had to really commit to my goals, my passion in the face of death threats and other things that happen along the way. So those have certainly been challenges. But if you know what you're doing and you know why you're doing it, you love what you're doing, it makes it a little bit easier to weather those challenges.
Great. Great story also. And I think we have a third great story coming up.
You're going to have a story anyway, so I'll tell you that. So I want to start with, hopefully everybody here has drunk the Kool-Aid of the value of not just a liberal arts education, but a Trinity College education. And I'm not being paid for this. I just have to tell you, I from the moment I started at Trinity, I bleed blue and gold. I was born and raised in the South in Hartford, so I traveled just as much as the other two when it went to going to college. But I went to a small community-based high school where I had a great opportunity. They selected a couple of students to take, it's not as common as that back then as it is now, but a couple of students to take a college class at Trinity College. And I was one of them. And I got to take an English class. And right then and there, I knew I wanted to go to Trinity. It was an amazing experience. I probably could have walked here in less time than it would take for you folks to walk across campus, or maybe not much longer. But it was like being in a different world. And so when it came time, I knew I wanted to go to college. I was the first in my family to go to a four-year college, and it was Trinity. I applied early decision. I applied to some other schools just to be safe, but I applied early decision. I got in. I had no idea how I was going to be able to get the tuition to pay for it, but due to the very generous efforts of Trinity College, between loans, of course, which I paid until I was a practicing lawyer, but the grants and the scholarships, I was able to come here. And originally I lived at home because, again, I didn't really live that far away, but started advocating even at the beginning. The Trinity was not a commuter college. It's still not. And so as a commuter, you kind of felt like you were missing out on the college experience, even though people were welcoming and warm. And so I went to the administration and I advocated and asked if we could develop a commuter lounge. And they said, that's a great idea, go ahead and do it. And they let me. So we had a commuter lounge, and that was great. At least we had somewhere to call our own, leave our things, have lockers. But I still felt like I was missing out on something. And I always did what I tell my son to always do. You should always ask, because if the person says no, you're in no different position than if you didn't ask, but at least you have a chance, right? I went to the administration, I said, my parents cannot afford room and board. I can't justify staying here, I live so close, but I'm missing out on the experience. Is there any opportunity for funding for me to stay here? And somehow they made it work. And so I started off with such an amazing, positive experience that I never would have had were it not for the generosity and the welcoming and supportive environment of the Trinity administration. And my experience was like that through all my classes too. My husband, who's sitting in the back, went to UConn. Oh, thanks. Show and tell, he raised his hand. And nothing against UConn. I went to the law school and I loved it, but I knew I wasn't a big college girl. I needed a small environment. And he would come to visit me and professors would walk by and say, hi, Claudia. And he's like, they know your name? You know, it's an amazing experience. Coming with that is the opportunity to explore what you want to do. I too did not know that I wanted to be a lawyer. I knew I was interested in it. I wanted to be either a high school English teacher or a public defender. That's what I wanted to be. And I came here, and through, again, the way that we had the open curriculum, we could do different things, we could develop our own plans for classes. I got certified to teach high school English, got my coordinate major, worked through the consortium, and then also interned at the police department in Hartford, and with the help of the staff here and the faculty here. And so you got to do so many different things. And ultimately, I made the decision that I wanted to go to law school and figured, I'll figure it out. I know I want to do one of those two things. Maybe I'll do both. And for a while, I did. And then it's just, none of that would have happened were it not for Trinity as the foundation. So from there's so many opportunities and so many doors to be opened. I went to UConn Law School. As I mentioned, I clerked on the Connecticut Appellate Court, which was amazing. I worked as, we'll talk about, I'm sure, the challenges of women through the legal profession. So I ended up being one of the early female partners at my first law firm. I was then the managing attorney for national insurance companies, one of two in the country, and the only one in Connecticut, and then opened my own firm. And I've been a trial lawyer for almost 28 years. The last few years, I was also the mayor of my town, was very active in politics. I like to do a lot of things, and I like to be involved. And my whole goal is I wanted to do something to help people. And I hope I do that. Now I have the next challenge. I was blessed to be appointed by Governor Daniel Malloy in 2018, and I've been on the bench since then. And there's a whole different set of issues that relate to women in black. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's my story.
Nope. Great. Excellent.
I do want to touch on the unexpected and the challenges, because I did skip that. So the one thing about Trinity, and you all can relate to this, is if you work really hard, you do well. And so I was that kid who came here and I missed out on a lot of the parties, and I missed out on, I don't even remember coming into the Cine Studio. I lived in the library and I worked really hard. I was the person that studied because I wanted to be the top of my class. That was my goal when I came here. And it paid off, right? I got the high grades, achieved. It didn't matter, woman, black, you work hard, you win. And I learned that here. And then when I went to UConn, the same thing. You work hard, you top of the class, you get the best jobs. I had 11 offers coming out of the law school, top of my class. You work hard, you win. Well, when I went to my first law firm job, big law, my grades got me there, top of the class, got that offer, 6 figures as a first year. Working hard didn't matter when I hit big law. In fact, what I didn't expect was that I was intentionally excluded from the activities that other young lawyers were involved in. The partners didn't ask me to lunch. I didn't get the good assignments. No one stopped by my office to see how I was doing or to invite me to a meeting with a client. No one was interested in knowing who I was. And in fact, a partner even said to me, "How did you get here?" And so what I didn't expect was that I could work really, 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 really hard and still not matter because of the color of my skin or because I was a woman. And so I had to learn how to navigate in a big law firm with other lawyers that I knew I was smarter than, that I worked harder than, and I had to prove that I belonged there. And no one else had to do that. But the one thing, the reason I was able to survive that, and it was not easy because I did it for 8 years, was because of my experience at Trinity. And knowing that if you continue to work hard, you continue to drive, you continue to have grit, at some point, someone will notice you. And that's exactly what happened. There was a partner from Trinity who noticed me when I was working at Weil Gotshal in New York. And he took me under his wing. And he said to me, his name was Alan, I can't, he was class of 71, took me under his wing and said, "Listen, I'm gonna show you the ropes. Don't worry about everyone else. I'm gonna take care of you. I'm gonna protect you." And that's how I was able to make it through. I had Enron was my first client, WorldCom, Global Crossing, all the big bankruptcies. None of the partners were willing to train me. But this Trinity partner took me under his wing to help me get credibility amongst the other partners. The other thing that I didn't expect was I asked another associate, I said, why am I being excluded? Like, why don't I get the good assignments? Or why doesn't anyone invite me to lunch? I'm pretty cool. I was cool at Trinity. I played sports. I played softball, volleyball, everybody. What is it? And her answer was, "LaTanya, we just don't get you." So as you can imagine, as a first-year lawyer, someone saying to you, "We just don't get you, and that's why you don't get these opportunities," it broke me, as a young lawyer. And so at some point throughout my career, I was carrying it through my whole career. And at some point, one of my bosses said to me, "LaTanya, own it. Okay, they don't get you, own it." And it was at that moment that I realized that the things that people didn't get about me were actually my superpowers. Those were the things that helped me to actually excel in my career. And I just leaned in on those traits and those gifts and those talents. And those were the talents that got me where I was when I was at Trinity. And so that I didn't expect. Working hard doesn't necessarily help you win as a person of color and as a woman in big law. It's more than that. You have to find a way to lean in when you're being excluded.
An important story.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm really glad that you came back to that, LaTanya. And so maybe we'll start with you again, because I think this might be a good follow-up. And we did have this conversation about the questions, and this was one of my favorites that all of my fellow panelists wanted to be sure we covered. What would you have told your younger self? Or what might you have told your younger self, knowing what you know today as a woman in the law? And it's kind of, you were sort of going there a little bit, so maybe say a little more, and then others.
One is, you belong, right? If you're at the table and you're in that boardroom, and I sit in the boardroom every day, and I'm still the only woman and the only person of color in the room, which I'm trying to change. I spent a lot of time trying to diversify the legal profession, and now the C-suite. And you belong. You belong. You should be there. And when you walk in that room, you take up space. You take up space. None of this, when I walk in the room, you should see me. I'm like this. Everybody knows I'm in the room, and I own it. And then the other one was the own it part, So what? I'm different. So what? I don't look like, the gray-haired, white, older guys that don't see me as their younger selves. So what? My best relationships are with the people that don't look like me and have nothing in common with me, because I was able to own my differences and my uniqueness. So own it and take up space.
Great.
So I would echo one of the things that you talked about, which is you said working hard was not enough. I think what I would say is you have to work harder. I think as a woman, as a person of color, you have to work harder than everybody else. And I would tell my younger self that. You have to work harder. You're not going to get the same benefit of the doubt that a lot of white men get. But working hard isn't really the guarantee that you might think it is. Along the way, particularly when you're dealing with law and law school and jobs, you think there's sort of a certain way you should do it, and that it's this linear process, and it's really not. And it's not about what I would tell a younger lawyer, what I would tell my younger self is, it's not about, success is not a particular job, it's not a particular credential that you have. It's really about finding your passion and doing what you love and doing it really, really well. And if your passion is international law, if your passion is being a jurist or whatever, or like me with civil rights, then you really need to work hard, work harder, and commit yourself to that. It's not about going to work for big law if that truly isn't your passion. And for a while I thought, well, the job is you graduate, you get a good job at a big firm, you make a lot of money. And in law school, I spent a summer at a big firm, and I was miserable. I was doing work that I didn't think, at least for me, was meaningful or important. And I came in one Monday morning and just quit. And I went, I think, the next week and started working for the ACLU. And I was just much happier. And if you really, truly find what your passion is and commit yourself to it, that's going to be success. And you can build a career as opposed to a job.
Yeah, also really, really important advice.
So now I'm going to piggyback on Lisa, but before I do that, I just have to say I'm very excited because Robin Shepard just came in, my rugby coach. So, and an amazing woman leader in her own right, so thank you for being here. But I want to just piggyback on the comment about generally follow your passion. And with that, I would say, don't let anybody else define you. You're going to get, regardless of what you're doing, in particular in the legal practice, it's come a long way. There are a lot more women, and I can speak for Connecticut because that's primarily where I've practiced all these years and where I'm now sitting. But I have a couple resources for you if you have an interest of the history of women in the law in Connecticut. But, we started where it was unheard of that women would be lawyers. There was the first woman to become a lawyer, Mary Hall, was in the late 1800s, and then there haven't been for a while there were not very many more. And then now we're at a point where, there was a shift in the law school admissions. They went to being 50-50 and some even a little bit higher. Lawyers, now you see a lot more women lawyers, in some areas more than others, but still so, and in leadership roles. And in the Connecticut judiciary, just even now looking at it, when I started clerking on the Connecticut Appellate Court, it was under the first woman chief judge. And we did have a couple chief justices that were women, Ellen Ash Peters and Chase Rogers. But now you look at the Supreme Court in Connecticut, it's made up significantly of women. Same with our Connecticut Superior Court. The Connecticut Bar Foundation has a project called the Oral History of Women in Connecticut. And I would urge you, if you have any interest at all, to look at the Connecticut Bar Foundation website and look for that. There's oral histories with some of the trailblazers, and they also have a Women in Black portrait project as well. But it's very interesting, and we don't have time to talk about it today, but it's pretty cool. And so now, and just looking at where we are, I want to steal something from Joanne Berger-Sweeney this morning at the Women Leadership Breakfast. She said, when she was at the Half Century Club, and now the class of 73 was being indoctrinated into that, and it's the first class that were women. And even though there were not a high percentage of women in that class, the folks that were involved in the planning and the leadership was about 50%. And her words, and I said, that's perfect. She said, that's because, and this is nothing to say against our male colleagues, but it's because she said, appropriately, we show up, we stand up, and we get the job done. And that's true. And so you just don't let anybody else define you. You're going to have people that are going to, what Lisa said is absolutely right. We do have to work harder, but it's not because the guys are all sexist. It's because their mindsets a lot of times are different and they don't realize the differences. You know, women are balancing a lot of times being moms while still holding a career. And, you know, there's different views on that, but we have the right to do that too. And so a lot of times you're working harder to prove that you are, you know, getting the job done in order to survive in what was historically a predominantly male area. And so that's a particular challenge, I think. So the advice I would say is follow your passion, don't let anyone else define you, and just keep on going.
Great. I think there's a lot of consistency here in terms of what I'm hearing. I'm gonna, I think, at least do one more question here before we open up to Q&A, because I also really like this question, which was to ask each of our panelists to reflect on being a woman in your role, and everybody's talked about that a little bit already, but maybe talk more specifically, and I think, again, LaTanya, you talked about this very specifically in the boardroom, right? But in the courtroom. And, you know, just, I teach a course on law gender in the Supreme Court, as some of you know, and, you know, we study Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and we know that a lot has been said about this over the past several decades. And, you know, it's, even with what you say, it seems to me, Claudia, you know, there may be more women in law school, but that doesn't mean there are more partners in the law firms, right? Or there, you know, where are women positioned more generally, right? And so maybe we could say something again about just your reflections on being a woman, you know, in the boardroom, in the courtroom, or anywhere else where you may be. Where you think it matters, and what, again, you know, what you might offer for those of us listening to you today.
Well, what I found in the boardroom, at least, is, you know, the message to women is, you know, you can sit here, you know, but don't expect to be at the head of the table. And so I have spent a lot of time trying to break those barriers by being in the room. But I had to figure out how to get there. And so for me, I always took on opportunities that no one else wanted, or took risks basically in taking on assignments that were not necessarily attractive to most women. So again, you know, it was not easy to fly to another country, especially West Africa, to lead in an area where I knew nothing about the law, I knew nothing about Ghanaians, I knew nothing about, you know, West Africans, nothing. But taking that risk and leaving actually set me up for my next opportunity. And then that next opportunity, and traveling for 98% of the time, in 2019, 2019, I was in the U.S. 14 business days. That's it. And so it wasn't comfortable, but taking on those opportunities opened up the door so that I could actually, I should say, I kicked down the door so that I could get into the boardroom. And so now that I'm in there, it's amazing because I have the incredible ability and responsibility to bring in a perspective that my other colleagues has never heard before. In my company and the company before that, the boardroom was all white male, period. So I bring a different perspective, you know, things that they may not have thought about. And they're very interested in hearing what I have to say. Now, I don't talk all the time like I talk now, but when I'm in the boardroom, I listen intently, and I'll plant different seeds, and I'll give a different perspective, and it always results in some movement for the business. And so I think that being in the boardroom provides an amazing opportunity as a leader to effectuate change, to impact the strategy of the company. Real example, you know, we sell sun care, we sell face care, And you look at the ads and you say, you don't have a person of color in any of these ads. Does that consumer not matter? In fact, most of the places that have a lot of sun have a lot of people of color, right? And so just little basic common sense points that I can bring into the room make the difference. The other thing is being a lawyer in the boardroom. They don't want lawyers. They don't like lawyers in corporate boardrooms. They want business advisors. And so again, I have to take off the lawyer hat and provide that business strategy perspective. And I'm telling you, they just eat it up, And so the more women that I can get into the room, the better and faster the business is gonna grow and be more profitable. Because at the end of the day, we have this ability, this intuition, this strength, this vision that a man just doesn't have. He doesn't think like we do. And so the more women we bring in, I think the more profitable and better corporate businesses will be. And so that's my goal.
Great.
Yeah.
If I'm talking to younger lawyers, younger female lawyers, and we're talking about being in the courtroom, or I wouldn't say the boardroom, because if we're in the boardroom, we're probably in the middle of a fight of some sort, but in a meeting.
Or an investigation.
Right. I think what you said earlier was interesting, taking up space. I think there is a tendency to try to minimize the women in the room, to minimize their contributions. And sometimes with younger women, what I have seen in my firm and in my career is that women will sort of internalize that and they will shrink. And so taking up space is really important and not allow yourself to be minimized. And it's really important to exude the confidence and competence that you have so that no one questions whether you have a place at the table or a place in the courtroom. And it's really important to understand and not respond to the bullying or to the assumptions that other people are going to try to put on you. And so it happens less, I think, as you get more senior and you get a little bit older and angry. But particularly for younger women in the profession, being conscious of just exuding the competence and the confidence that you have, and you need to demonstrate that because people are going to respect it.
Yeah, also important, and I would imagine I'm not a panelist here, but I'm just going to say, because what you're all suggesting is that that's also kind of a powerful mentoring message that you can pass along. So it's not just that you're doing it, but that you're teaching it. And I think...
Right, and there are a lot of women who come into it and they'll go into a meeting and they'll be very deferential or they won't speak up, literally with volume. And so there's a lot of mentoring and coaching about, how to be most effective in any given situation. And I think women will need more of that. There are young men who come in and they talk too much, right? And you have to tell them to talk less, and it's not about you. So, and that's of course not all men, but we don't seem to see the same problems with our male associates.
Yeah. Very interesting. And so Claudia, I would think you would have something in particular to say about the courtroom.
Yeah, well, I was a practicing lawyer longer than I've been on the bench, so I kind of have the broad brush. But just on the comment that you made about just because there are maybe more women lawyers doesn't mean that there are more women partners. While that's true to a certain extent, there really are. And it's by following, I think, the approach in particular, Lisa, that you were talking about. And this is not to say it's across the board gender-based, because quite frankly, there are a lot of women that talk too much too, And there are some guys that don't talk enough. So the rule, I think, for everybody, but women in particular, is number one, find a mentor. It doesn't have to be just one, but you should find somebody that you feel comfortable with, somebody who is supportive of you. Take advantage of your Trinity network. It doesn't have to be someone you work with, but ideally if it's somebody within the firm that you're comfortable with. And quite frankly, it's okay if you go somewhere and like Lisa said, I know I'm not a big firm person. I hated the big firm environment, not my thing. So if you go somewhere and you know that this is not your jam, it's okay to move on and find somewhere where you are comfortable, because you will. And the progress is slow, but it's there. I started with a firm where there was a woman as a named partner, and she was one of the first named women partners in Connecticut. She joined the firm in 1957. And then after that, there was a dry spell, and I was one of the few women partners at that firm in 1990. When I was the mayor of Rocky Hill, I was the second woman mayor in 2015. The first one was elected in 2001. So for 14 years, there was not another, not because there weren't qualified people. It's just the way, but then you look now and you look at the progress, and when I ran for mayor in 2015, I was part of Ella's list, and you look at all the women candidates that were running on both sides of the aisle, there are a lot more. There's a lot more people, women out there that are getting involved. Don't be afraid to do that. So that would be my advice. I hate that saying, giving you advice, but don't be afraid to do what you want to do, to give it a shot, and to find people that are supportive of what you want to do and that you can use as a soundboard to help you along.
Thank you. I think what I'm going to do now, since it's just about time for that, we have one more question if we get back to it. But I think that since we have a lot of people here, why don't we open up the floor and see if we have questions, and we will have a mic. So I think this is a great opportunity. We have a question. Excellent.
First of all, I want to just say thank you for being here. This is such an inspirational talk that I chose to stay here rather than go with my husband to hear George Will. So thank you. I'm just able to relate to so much that you're talking about. I graduated from college in '73, went to graduate school. There were no women at all in my profession, none. And there were, I'm an Episcopal priest, there were a lot of really hard times. And so the question I wanted to ask you is, what got you through the really hard times? Because when you are trailblazing, a pioneer, you're going to bump up against things that get difficult. And maybe others need to hear your story about what got you through.
I think for me, it's two things. One is prayer. My dad's a pastor, so I just kind of came up with that whole faith perspective. And then the other one was actually playing sports. I played volleyball, basketball, softball, all the way up since I was 6 years old, all the way through Trinity, UConn, even intramural. And there were skills that I learned on the court and in the field that I literally applied when I was in the boardroom or, doing a deal, going to trial on the Enron matter. And some of those values of teamwork and collaboration and grit and, you can knock me down, but I'm going to get back up. And, being an offensive player. I learned all those things on the field and in the court, on the court. And I think that's how I got through. It was something inside of me, that fire, that burn, that I'm not going to fail. If I fail, it's going to be because of something I did, not because someone else said I failed. And so I think it's that internal grit learned both through prayer and sports.
Very interesting.
Well, I do think playing sports does make you tougher, for sure. So that is helpful. I would add to that having a good, strong network of supporters, whether that's friends or family or colleagues, like-minded folks who do what you do or understand what you do or understand that it's your passion and can support you through that. I think one of the things that I've learned along the way is that the people around you really make you who you are, or at least make you the best you can be. And so going through difficult times, having the support of your law partner or your spouse or your kids or your friends, whatever it is really what helps keep you going. And knowing, at least in my circumstance, there are people who are depending on you. So, I have clients who are in dire circumstances, dealing with a lot, and they rely on me. And so I have a sense of responsibility that this is hard, this is tough, but I'm going to keep going.
So there was talk about what happens in the boardroom, and I have my own board. I have my personal board of directors, and that's what I think is what keeps you going. It starts with my family. I've had my husband since I was 15. We weren't married at 15, but he's been around for a long time. But even when I knew my father never ever pushed or said he wanted me to go to college, but I knew he did. I knew my parents wanted me to, and they were always very supportive, and they celebrated. I was very blessed. They celebrated every little thing I did. When my father passed away at the age of 75, he still had framed a poem that I wrote when I was 6 years old. Like, that's what I grew up with. And at one point when I was younger, I said, I didn't know what I wanted to be. And I'm like, Dad, what if I wanted to be a garbage man? He said, as long as you're the best garbage man you can be, I'll be proud. And so you have that, like I had that from the beginning, having that support. And then you have to have good people around you. So there are a lot of people that, let's face it, there's some people who are not necessarily bad people. They just may not know. But there are some bad people. I still tend to believe there are far more good people than bad. Even with everything that's going on and what you can say about things, I still believe that. But you got to find the people that should be at your personal table for your personal board of directors, people that you can go to have that sounding board, or when you are getting frustrated because somebody's being a jerk, you can talk through that, and you have the right people around you. I just want to tell one more story. I was on the hiring committee for I'll just say a firm, because I don't want to give any names away. But there are some people, and you look at them and go, is this guy really, did he just really say that? We were interviewing candidates, and there was no question the woman was the most qualified candidate. Best resume, best references, and we were talking about, after they all left, which candidate we were going to make an offer to, and I proposed that one, and I had other people that agreed with me, and then I had one very loud partner who said, well, but she's a young woman, and when she has kids, and she's going to want to go on maternity leave, and I'm like, did you just really say that? Like, are you serious? But so you're going to have that kind of backlash. But then, if you have the supportive people there, you have to speak up, and you have to hope you have the support to get through those tough times.
And a good lawyer.
Well, not when you're sitting in a hiring committee meeting, but. Yeah.
And I'll just add one more thing to having good friends. So Damien, he was the first person I met. Damien, raise your hand. First person I met when I came to Trinity. He helped me move into my dorm. And my parents, they dropped me off on the sidewalk and left. That's another story. But he was there, and he helped me move in. And our entire career, 23 years, we've been sparring for each other. Like, he's another lawyer. He's also in the boardroom. And I will call him late at night and say, look, this is what he said to me. What do you think? And we've been like that for 23 years. So the other thing is also having great friends and networks here from Trinity. That, if you're not tapping into those friends and those colleagues from here, you could be missing out. So it's and he's here today, that's real, having those contacts and networks from Trinity.
All great, and I do think advice is good. Yeah. I think advice, you hesitated, so we can call it whatever we want to call it, but I think it's really important to hear from, people who have so much experience and success about what we can all learn from here. Any other questions?
Of course.
Hi, thank you again for being here. And something that I wanted to ask you all about is regarding the fact that women in general tend to have their emotions more scrutinized. And I would imagine, especially in a field like the law, that's meant to be much more pragmatic and regulated, that if you show an ounce of emotion, that it's much more scrutinized or put under a microscope than a man. So I was wondering how you strike the balance between composure and passion, or share an anecdote about a time when your intuition has actually led you to more success than the pragmaticism that is so often touted in the legal field.
Well, I think passion's a great thing. And, it sort of depends on what you're dealing with and what you're talking about. If you're in a meeting and you're talking about a budget, and you start pounding on the table or burst into tears, that's maybe not as appropriate as being passionate in advancing a cause or an argument in court or wherever else, and knowing sort of how to moderate that. And there's maybe a line between passion and somewhat out of control, so you're not yelling, right? But passion is a good thing in every respect, I think, in the law, as long as it's done in the right way, in the right context. You're right, women who raise their voices or exude too much passion can sometimes be seen as overly emotional, but I don't think that's something that you can get caught up in. I think you have to do what you need to do to advocate your case and to be the best lawyer for your client that you can be, and that necessarily is going to involve some amount of passion, not necessarily emotion, but just strong feelings.
It's funny, that was an area that I got wrong early on in my career, because I was so polished in in this square, and that's just not me. I'm very dramatic, as you guys, just passionate and dramatic. But I was always trained to make sure that you always are, always together, And I remember one of the feedbacks I received after I was with the company for 7 years, they said to me, I said, why am I not advancing? I've done all these things, I checked, and the feedback was, well, we don't know you. I'm like, what? I go out with you guys all the time. But when you should get mad, you don't. When you should be sad, you don't show that. When you are, we don't know how you feel about things. And I was like, oh my God, all I had to do was be myself all this time. So after they told me that, they really got it. But, I was very polished, and that just did not work when it was time to advocate or be passionate or to push for a cause. And so now I've learned how to say what I really think. If it's bullshit, I say it's bullshit, and it works.
And there's a different style, for different people. So my law partner is, famously sort of way up here in emotions and whatnot, and I'm a little bit more measured. And so together we make kind of a good combination because together it just works well. But it really is about who you are, what your personality is, because then you're going to be genuine, you're going to be effective. And there are going to be some people who are far more passionate or emotional than others, but perhaps no less effective.
I think that's a great question, and it is always a challenge, but I don't think passion and emotion are the same thing in the context, well, anywhere, but in the context of lawyering or in the law. Passion is a wonderful thing. You should be passionate. In fact, if you can't channel that passion, then sometimes you're doing a disservice to your client. So you have to get to the point where you're all in. But that doesn't mean you have to be emotional, because emotion sometimes clouds reason and detracts from the passion. And that applies also, when I put my political hat on, the same thing, because, when you're sitting in the front of, with the top of the council, and you're sitting there and people are not always nice. You can't get emotional. You can't even if in your head you're having a conversation, you got to figure out how to filter it. It's the same thing in the courtroom too. So now being on the other side of the bench, sometimes you hear really, really horrible things, really sad things. And sometimes, it may be appropriate for me to take a recess, because I need to make sure that I am appropriately processing what I'm hearing and being fair. And sometimes I have to remind myself, you take a break and go, okay, I gotta get through. I can't, just because I may feel badly for one side, I've got a job to do, and I have to take into account where I have discretion and where I have to apply the law that is required for me to apply. So it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, but passion is fabulous. Emotion is real, and it's important, but it has to sort of be kept in check, because it doesn't really have a place, a very small place in the courtroom.
When we were my law partner, I did the Kavanaugh hearings, and we were with Christine, and right before it all started, and we knew the cameras were going to be on her and the whole thing, I had to turn to my law partner, who was emotional, and say, don't cry. It was the last thing I said to her because we wanted, the focus to be on, obviously, Christine and not on, my law partner sitting there, crying, which she would do at a drop of a hat. So that was the last thing I said to her before we sat down.
Great. Does anyone else have, well, I think we have time for at least
This is more
one
of
more.
a comment than a question.
Sure.
First, I wanted to thank you all for presenting and for trailblazing. And this is kind of a plug for anybody who is maybe thinking of being a woman lawyer. I am an attorney at the Criminal Division at the Department of Justice, and I have found it such an in DC.
You're busy
in DC.
right now, aren't you?
And I am actually prosecuting some of the January 6 cases, so that is busy. But I have found it to be such a great place for women. We are really lots of women in leadership. I don't have any of the things you guys have talked about. I have not seen in my almost 15 years in the government. And I started as a local prosecutor. There were some interesting things there, but it usually wasn't my coworkers. It was, you're dealing with a lot of police officers who have some interesting opinions about things. But I think it's been a really great career. And so if anybody is thinking that they might want to be a lawyer, I made it 6 months at a law firm. I couldn't do it. But I've had a really great experience. But I also know that a lot of that is for people who've trailblazed the way for us. And again, just a plug, government service.
Great
very,
plug.
very female friendly. Everyone has babies, everyone comes back, it's all fine. Nobody says anything. I actually got hired for I was at a U.S. Attorney's office and they called and said, you cleared your background check. And I said, that's great, I'm having a baby in 10 days. I will see you in April. And they were like, that's great, just tell us when you want to come back. We hired 2 people recently that I was on the committee for. By the time they cleared, they were on maternity leave and that was no problem. So I don't know, I just wanted to share that experience to know that I am taking resumes, we have interns, we have all the things, but I just wanted to say that I think things are getting better in certain fields, which makes me feel pretty good.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you for that great example of the Trinity Network, too.
So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to allow everybody to wrap up and on the panel. I'm just going to say thank you again to everyone. That's my wrap up. And ask what you might have for closing thoughts. Anything else you'd like to talk about? Anything, Trinity, reunion, women in the law, the Red Sox. Right, may we pray for them. And anything else you would like to say because this,
I think you wanted to take the lead on this one, right?
Oh, okay, well, sure. So one thing that we didn't talk about was about wellness and mental health and just taking care of you. There's a lot of women that are not making it into older years, especially women lawyers, for whatever reason. It's the stress, we're losing a lot of our women leaders. I mean, I've seen about 6 or 7 in the last year who were in their 40s and they just died. Not knowing why or how, just died. And so it's my reminder to you all, whatever career you're in, whether it's law or any other intense career, just reminding you to take care of you, listen to your body, take care of yourself first. Put on your mask first before you start taking care of everybody else. We're all the rocks for our families, and there are many times that we just don't stop and listen to our inner selves saying rest or take a break or meditate. So I literally, that year I told you I was out of the country for 14 days, in the country for 14 days, I ran 5 miles, and the next morning I woke up and I was fully paralyzed. I was at the healthiest point of my life, and I woke up and I was fully paralyzed. And I was paralyzed for that next year. I had to learn how to walk, I had to learn how to talk, I had to learn how to blink. My face is still paralyzed. I actually can smile even though you haven't seen it, because my face is paralyzed. And the doctors to this day cannot tell me why or what happened. I was 100% healthy, they tested for everything, and they said the only cure is to rest. Do not be like me and end up in the hospital, for a month and out of work for a year, trying to learn how to walk again, just to prove that you're a boss. So that's my advice, the wellness thing. If you ever want to know the story, I'm happy to share it with you, but it was traumatic. And I was only 43 when it happened. And thank God I'm fully healthy now. I had a baby at 47 just 6 months ago. But I lost time because I wasn't putting myself first. And then the other thing I want to do, I want you guys to answer this question if you have an answer to this question. I also want us to talk about what Renny has done for us in whatever capacity it is in our careers, because I think it's important to celebrate our leaders while they're here and give roses while they're here. So I want to make sure that we talk about what has Renny done for us.
Do you want to answer the first question first, though?
Well, she
No, I meant
answer
me?
the first question first.
Self-care. So, yes, I agree, and what a horrible story. I think that that's terrible, and yes, we all need to be focused on our health and our wellness, particularly as we get older. I'm still trying to grapple with that myself and finding time in the day and whatnot, but I also think that early in our careers, it's really important to work really hard and get really good at what you do and establish yourself. So I do think, because I do a lot of presentations, or I appear before young attorneys, and there's always the question about self-care. And I know I'm getting old because, I'm like, well, maybe don't worry about that so much right now as getting really good at what you're doing, because, working hard when you're young is important, but then also realizing that you need to balance it. So it's a bit of a balance. Anyway, I have lots of thoughts on that, but I'll hold off and let you talk about that, and then we can get to the more important things like Renny.
Yes.
So I'm the oldest one out of the three on this panel, and I'm still here, so that's a good thing. And in the, thank you, yeah, thank you. In the words of Mark Twain, who actually was a former client of my law firm, by the way, but I wasn't there at that time, I'm not that old.
You're not that old.
Right, but rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. That being said, I may be good at some things, but balance and self-care is not one of them, because I too tend to fill every moment of the day, and it's sometimes hard to not put yourself last. But as you get older, I do, you realize that you do have to make some time to do some things. So I am trying to build some time in, but it's a hard thing to do when you're focusing on a career that you're passionate about, and you want to do well, and you want to get things done, and there's just so many hours in the day, and then plus on top of that, taking care of family. I happen to have it on both ends. My son is now not a baby anymore, although I told him he's always going to be my baby. And I have elder care issues. So, we're in the middle of, at least those of you that are around my age, we're sort of the sandwich generation. And so it's often hard to find time for yourself, but it is a very important message. And I would urge everyone, myself included, to try to do better at that.
So now, Professor Fulco has been instrumental in many of our lives and careers. And, one day we're not going to have her teaching us anymore. I don't know when that is, but
Next year, end of the academic year.
so I want to make sure we give roses when they're due while she's still here teaching. So for me, again, Professor Fulco was the first woman that I met that was teaching the law. And I remember her standing in front of that classroom, and she would challenge us and inspire us and force us to advocate our positions. We couldn't just make a statement and let it go. She would always force us to prove what we're saying and support it, and she wouldn't let it go. So you taught me how to be an advocate, and it came from a woman who was strong and inspirational and just confident, and you were my first exposure to that in the law, so thank you. Thank you very much.
So when I got to Trinity, I was actually the first person in my immediate family to go to college, and I didn't come with a lot of confidence about my abilities, and I did gravitate towards the political science policy classes, and so of course had Renny as a professor, and I can honestly say that I would not have the career I have, I would not be a lawyer, I would not be doing any of the things I'm doing if it weren't for Renny Fulco. And because, not only was she a great teacher and I learned a lot, but she believed in me and went above and beyond to get me to try to realize my potential, and encouraged me to do things I wouldn't do, to write papers or enter contests. And I remember one time I was at, does everybody remember the College View Cafe? Mm-hmm. The View? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I was there once or twice, and I was sitting down there with some friends, and there was a phone call, and the owner of the View came over and said, Professor Fulco's on the phone for you. And she was calling me to tell me, I think there was a deadline to submit a paper for some award.
Trinity Papers.
The Trinity Papers, and she's basically hauled me out of the View to go do what I needed to do, and she kept me moving in the right direction, and she had confidence in me when I didn't have confidence in myself, and told me that I could do the things that I wanted to do. So for that, I will be forever grateful.
Thank you.
So I did not have the pleasure of having Renny Fulco when I was a student at Trinity, because we started about the same time. Actually, I started before you. Yeah. But so she came on board when I was already here. But my exposure has been through the alumni network. Again, because of how I feel about this college, when I had my firm, I made it a point to hire interns from Trinity. And so, Renny Fulco became like a verb. It was like whenever something was going to be done, it was, oh, Renny Fulco. Like, okay. And then, so that's how I learned her name. And then when I was with our Trinity Club of Hartford on the board and as the president, Renny Fulco was always very, very supportive. There are a lot of lawyers that have come out of Trinity College. Not only lawyers, but judges. And actually a female Supreme Court justice also, Judge Vertife. But whenever we wanted to do anything, whether it was providing legal panels or to have people come in so that anyone interested in the law could talk to people in different areas of the law. When we recently did a Trinity Club of Hartford panel with Justice Palmer, another graduate from the 70s, Ernie Maddie, and myself, and of course it was, Renny Fulco. She's like our pipeline to get people in. And so she's been very, very supportive, and her name is just known as the one who has the leadership and the passion to assist with the folks that are interested in the law. And so for that, as an alum, I am very grateful.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. And I would like to thank everybody for being here. I know we're up against some tough competition, so I feel really good about this.
We could talk about baseball too.
We could talk about baseball too, but just to say, what a pleasure, and to, you see it. You see who the alums of Trinity are, and just, that people can sit down like this. And this is why I do these things, because it's like, it's one of the most rewarding things I can do, is just to be sitting here with people who have, taken classes not just with me, but, taken advantage of everything Trinity has to offer, and come back and give their time, right? And come back and speak to audiences. And, we even did it through COVID. And I just feel very fortunate. I did not go to Trinity. My stepbrother did, but I did not. I was actually a tripod editor at one time. But I just feel so fortunate to be part of this network. And let me just say to you, Eva, this is what you have to look forward to, because this is real. These are the people who do the things, for our alums, the people sitting in this room, that really make all the difference. And so it's a great joy. So thank you all.
Well, thank you.